Hey there! Welcome to saas.unbound, brought to you by SaaS Group. I'm your host, Anna Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. And today with me, and I'm super excited about it, is Ken Miller, co-founder of Podium, your AI copywriter for podcast show notes, articles, social posts, and more, and actually my favorite AI tool at the moment. And also, he's a co founder of Fathom.fm. And I haven't had a chance to try it yet, but AI podcast player from the future sounds really intriguing. So I cannot wait to dig into that. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Well, like I said, I just uncovered Podium, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And it was just blind luck, honestly. I told my friend, and she's also a producer of Alpha List, an amazing podcast for CDOs. And she actually did a research about every podcast AI tool out there, and all of them had like, okay, that's fine, it does show notes, okay, it does social posts, not so good. And then there was Podium, and after every point it was great, 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 great. And it was like, okay, that does sound like you're a bit biased, but I've got to try it. So I went into Podium and I tried the first, I think it was like the first 3 hours of free, right? And
hmm
it worked magic for me, honestly. And now it saves me hours every week. So I'm a devoted customer. So can you first talk about your background maybe a little bit and how it led you to building Podium and Fathom?
Right. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. I often say that if you want to build a product and have it be successful, it has to feel like hot, impossible magic. And so that's really the kind of experience that we're targeting with Podium, and a big part of the reason why there's a significant difference between the output that you see in Podium versus other, like, write my show notes for me podcast AI tools, is because we started with Fathom, right? We started with the listener experience and building a lot of neural networks around that listener experience. We took all of that tech and then built Podium with it. So that kind of explains the difference. My background, I've been a software engineer. I've been in engineering for over 20 years now, held a variety of positions at a lot of startups. You know, my last position before this, I had actually made a transition from engineering into research. And so I was actually the director of research and then subsequently the chief research officer at a startup called Intrinio. They're like a post Series A startup in the financial data space. That was an awesome experience. And of course, what do I do after making that wonderful transition out of engineering into research? I'm right back in the CTO role as the co-founder of Fathom Labs Incorporated. So, where we started, it was actually in early 2020. I had begun to listen to a lot of podcasts, and one thing that was kind of glaringly obvious was that search and discovery for podcasts was just broken. Like, there was Apple Podcasts had a terrible search experience, Spotify had a terrible search experience, and I began to wonder, what would it look like if we actually just started, setting the compute cost issue aside, if we just started transcribing all of the episodes from the top, like, let's say 2,000 podcasts, and then built a search engine around that, but not any old search engine. What if we built an AI search engine around it that also supported things like extractive question answering? So spent about a year kind of planking away at that, finally arrived at something that was like a little bit mind-blowing, especially at that time, right? Because this is pre-chat GPT. This is, the GPT-2 days, before anybody knew about this tech and like what's actually possible. So I reached out to my co-founder, Paul, who, I've known for since high school. We've known each other over 20 years and worked at a few different companies together. And he had just taken like kind of a year-long sabbatical, actually as a Zen monk in Japan. And so he had just come back to the
That's
United States.
interesting.
Yeah. And he came back to the United States, and I was like, hey, Paul, man, I have an AI search engine for podcasts. Let's do a startup. And he was like, sounds great. Let's do it. And so, Fathom Labs was born. And our first product, as I mentioned, was the Fathom podcast player. Spent about 2 years building that. Um, Took on a significant amount of venture capital. Jason Calacanis is one of our investors, and what we came to realize though was that monetization of a podcast player is a very long road, right? So,
Oh,
um,
yes.
and the macroeconomics had shifted substantially from 2021 to 2023. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, what can we do with what we have? Which was, we trained about 15 different neural networks specifically on podcast data and the construction of the Fathom player. What can we do with this AI tech for the podcast creators themselves? And then Podium was born. And we launched that in early February, and everything's been up and to the right ever since.
Okay, interesting. So your co-founder, he just hasn't listened to anything for a year, and then he decided, okay, I'm just going to listen to all the podcasts in the world. That was an interesting
Right.
transition.
Well, Paul has had my co-founder Paul. He's had positions at numerous Bay Area, San Francisco startups, and so he's well versed in the space. He was the lead designer for another startup, kind of pre TikTok, but in that sort of media space called Jump Cam. So yeah, he was well familiar with the podcast space and that form of content.
Okay. All right. That sounds really exciting. So, and you said you were venture backed, at least with
Yes.
Fathom. What about Podium?
Well, the Fathom player and Podium as a product are all under one company, Fathom Labs, right? So,
Okay.
right. So it's like an umbrella. It encapsulates really like the Fathom player is one product line, Podium's another product line.
All right. So, how did you escape the whole like growth of the company where there are hundreds of people? Because a little bit of a backstory, I actually reached out for, I think, for my receipt when I purchased my subscription for Podium, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was already so in love with the product that I wrote to your customer support, like, how can I talk to Ken? And Ken replied. So it's kind of unusual. Like every time you try to, and there is like an old hack. Whenever you get an email from a founder, try to reply, and maybe he's there or she's there,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost never works. But in this case, it was like, I don't know, in 5 minutes, I received a response from you. So how involved are
Yeah, it
you
comes
in the whole
to our customer support.
operational
Everybody.
side of the business? Yeah, and into customer support.
Yeah. So at Podium, everybody on the team is on customer support. So at any given
Okay.
point in time, you may even be talking to Dr. Uelvis Gonzalez, like PhD, who heads up a lot of our ML and research stuff. He's an ex quantum physicist. So people don't know. They think they're talking to a customer support rep. They're actually talking to a doctor of quantum physics. But the thing is, we have a small team. We now, especially like through our Buzzsprout partnership, we have over 2,000 paying customers, or approaching about 2,000 subscribers. But we're still a small team, and a lot of our investment was spent on building the Fathom player. So we are currently raising again, but we had to really cut our burn. Really kind of just be in sync with the current macroeconomics of the market, right? Um, so yeah, at our company, everybody's on support. Every team member, we actually have shifts, right? Where we're covering support throughout the day. Um, for us, we have some like we have certain company values. We want to deliver magic to people, and we want for people to feel that they have a relationship with the product. And the easiest way to do that is to, even though we're in the AI space, we're all about being human, human to human contact. We are in the podcast space, and what podcasts really are about, at least from one perspective, is human connection.
Right, that's true. Okay, so again, a little bit about the fact that you guys are VC backed,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just asking you because, uh, like, go on Twitter and everyone says AI streamlines every startup journey, so you can um, tie AI, ChatGPT API or whatever to your startup or to your idea, and it will cost you next to nothing, and you get a ready to go startup, right? A ready to go company, a product. So the kind of the perception right now is that AI is so cheap and it makes everything so fast. So why even go to VCs at the moment if AI makes everything so simple?
Well, I mean, I think that there's, we began our fundraising before the whole chat GPT kind of like before that entered into the public consciousness. Um, and when we began, we were actually constructing and training our own neural networks. So when you're doing that, there's a lot of R&D involved, and you're going to need some VC, cash or some form of investment really to support those R&D efforts, support those deep tech efforts. And there's still plenty of venture capital going into AI. It just tends to be for those companies that are actually constructing neural networks, right? Maybe they're even using uh, other third-party provider large language models. But if you're constructing your own neural networks, that means you've got R&D involved. That means you're going to need something to get that rocket ship off the ground. Now, if you have discovered a niche where it's like there's a problem, it can be solved with AI. It requires a bit of like a programmatic container around a large language model in order to solve the problem. There's plenty of people right now that are doing the kind of like indie hacker build in public movement or the self-funded movement. And hey, I think that's great. If you can start a company and grow it without any investment capital, like, listen, you're free. And I mean that, which isn't to say that if you take on investment that you're not free. We have great relationships with our investors. They've been supportive. We haven't run into really any of the problems that um, or any of the horror stories that you sometimes hear. It's been a completely different experience for us. So I don't think that one is better than the other. I think that, that you got to use the right financial tools for the job at hand. And if you're facing a lot of research and development and some actual like construction of neural networks and training of them, then maybe taking on investment's a good idea. If you think you can get the job done and without any kind of serious R&D involved, go for it, And generally speaking, I would say that if you're doing a startup, the thing you want to get to as quickly as possible, especially in this particular economic environment, is you want to be default alive, right? You want to be in a position where no matter what, you're not going away, right? And
Yeah.
part of the issue with taking on investment is that you can suddenly ramp up your workforce, right? But then you need to find the revenue to continually support that. So you're in a kind of precarious position. Whereas if you're just sort of building it from scratch with no investment, you can grow at a rate where the company is essentially self-sustaining.
Okay, yeah, it completely makes sense. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Like, nothing wrong with just slapping an AI API onto your product if it resolves the problem. But if you're working on something bigger, then sure, you probably need investment. And that said, it goes into my next question, into slapping the AI API or whatever solution to your product. Another thing that we discussed here on the podcast is that um, sometimes it feels a bit unfair at the moment for founders that started their companies earlier. So they've been growing them, and building them from scratch, step by step. And now basically anyone with an AI solution can come and reach the same, at least product development stage. Obviously, not marketing,
Yeah.
right? Because you still have to sell your product, but basically develop the product to a point, or even to a greater point than founders that have been working on something like that for years. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I think all is fair in love and business. You can't cry over spilled milk. It's business. Technology is going to change. You need to be prepared for that. I'm sure that, 120 years ago or so, there were plenty of blacksmiths walking around, really upset about
True.
all of the
Yeah.
changes in metalwork. I'm sure that as the printing press was invented, that there were tons of scribes super upset. Like, oh, look at these letters. These letters have no character, no style. They're not handwritten. They're terrible. They're garbage. I think that you just have to listen. If you're gonna get into the startup game, you just need to be prepared for anything, because anything can shift at a moment's notice. And I mean, if you are a startup, whether you're venture backed or not, and you're building off of OpenAI, I mean, you need to be prepared for the whims of Sam Altman. Like at any moment they could change something. They could have a dramatic impact on your business if 80% of what you do is wholly dependent upon the fact that GPT-4 exists. I don't really look at the fact that startups, even in our space, can do things faster and better now. I just see that as a challenge. And certainly with Podium, it's interesting, right? Because so as a general category, what Podium represents is a new node in the podcasting value chain that suddenly appeared, right? So what's in this chain? Well, it starts with this thing, right? A microphone. So, and then from a microphone, it's going into your recording software like Riverside, what we're using right now, right? So, and then from there, what are you going to do with it? Well, some people will upload it to Descript and edit it a bit. Cool, right?
That's
And then
me.
from there, where is it going to go? From there, now, after Descript, it used to go into your RSS host, right? But now it goes into Podium. So, and we have other competitors in the space, and they really occupy this new node that has appeared in that value chain. And then, of course, just to continue the value chain from Podium into your RSS host, then load it into a player, and then into a listener's ear, right? So, so there's this new node that's appeared in a value chain, and you're seeing this actually across many, many industries, right? Nobody saw large language models coming. They've appeared on the scene, and now there's a new thing everybody's doing in these value chains, right? That's really kind of like a game changer. But in our particular case, while there are several other competitors out there to Podium, to your point, there's a pretty big difference when you run your audio through, right? And the reason for that is because we had a 2-year head start. And so we don't merely just take your transcript and throw it at chat gpt. We actually use other neural networks are working to actually, like several, like 15 of them are working to actually construct the input into chat gpt. So it's neural networks on neural networks. For us, it's neural networks all the way down.
Okay, that's awesome. And I already said I absolutely love the product. I'm not going to try and like sugarcoat it and say it's
No.
perfect all the way. Sometimes it messes up my show notes, but it's uh it's this or working hours through an episode, just scraping everything you gotta scrape and trying to put it into something nice. So I will take what Podium gives me any day.
Right.
But
Oh, I was just
yeah,
going to say, yeah, you can't, AI is not at a point right now where it's going to get you to 100%. It's just not. Whereas other offerings in our space maybe get you to 65, 70%. That our whole goal was like, well, can we get you to 85%? Can we get you just a little bit higher than everybody else? Um,
I think that's pretty
right.
precise. Yeah.
And also just save you time, especially when it comes to things like chapter timestamps. I mean, come on. What are you going to do? You're going to read through your whole transcript and figure out where those segment breaks are. And we know from the Fathom player side that when you include chapter timestamps, you actually get higher engagement. So if we see a podcast that had been publishing their episodes and not including any timestamps in their show notes, and then suddenly they start doing it, their engagement goes up. So it's great now that you don't have to spend that hour, even what an hour long episode. Even if you're a speed reader, maybe you have 30-40 minutes of time that you got to spend going through and figuring out, okay, there's a good break, right? So yeah, it's a huge time saver. And what I'm most excited about is we're at a certain point today, and everybody kind of like knows about, if you look at the progression from like GPT-3 to GPT-4. So people get it now, right? It's like, whoa, there's I was using ChatGPT, and then if you're a paying subscriber and you're using GPT-4, you're like, whoa, this is like next level. It's not perfect yet, but it's a fairly significant jump.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people are seeing that progression happen over the last year. Well, what they don't know is that before ChatGPT came on the scene, there was actually GPT-3, which was not trained for chat specifically, but it was trained for instruct. Before that was GPT-2 and GPT-1, right? Going all the way back to like early 2019, I think. So there was actually, before this all entered into the public consciousness, we've seen in the AI space all of these progressions forward. So what am I getting at? Well, what I'm getting at is what I'm excited for is 4 years from now. Because 4 years from now, it's not going to be the case where it gets you to 85%. 4 years from now, it's going to get you to 130%.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, if now I can save myself so many hours and it's good. I again, not sugarcoating it. I do still have to like check if some names are botched
Oh,
or
right.
like if I don't know, yeah, the some part of that doesn't really make sense. But hey, it's just so good. And like you said, and I'm a fast reader, but still, those 40 minutes, I mean, it's 40 minutes to prepare for the
Right.
podcast, 40 minutes to do the podcast, 40 minutes to edit the podcast, 40 minutes to.
Right.
It's a lot of
It
40
all it all
minutes.
starts adding up, and there's a lot of podcasters out there for
Yeah.
whom their podcast is kind of like and even if they have a large audience, it's a real labor of love for them, and they've been spending years putting their time and their effort into their podcast. And so but it's not necessarily like paying all of their bills or anything like that. So anything we can do to keep them on the mic, doing the fun thing, having the fun conversations, and reduce the time to publishing. We get a love letter every day. I think maybe one of my favorite parts about this business is, and those words really do kind of like keep us going and keep us motivated to kind of like push the quality even higher.
Yeah. Oh, I read some of your testimonials. I think my favorite one was um, Fathom did to audio what Google did to text.
Oh yeah, for the
And it was like, wow, I have to try it now because I love Podium now. And after I read it, I actually applied to be on Fathom because it's not saas.unbound is not listed there. So fingers crossed to get there
Oh well,
soon.
yeah. I will
And
definitely get you added
yeah,
to the platform.
yes,
I mean, that's another challenge that we've faced as a startup, and I think maybe for this particular audience, it might be a bit instructive. So, what do you do when you've built a product? It's got traction, and you'll see this happen a lot in the direct to consumer space. Okay, you built a product that has some consumer traction, but you're looking at the numbers. You got to pay attention to the numbers, and you look at it, and you're like, getting to 1 million users here, we're looking at like 4 years, maybe, and so the road to monetization is really long, and we spent a long time building this. It's great, but marketing is hard. It's hard to cut through the noise. And so then you decide to pivot. You know, what do you do? Do you kill off the product that you were building and just stick with your pivot, or do you keep it going? Right? Like, so that's really one of the issues that we faced with the Fathom player. We ultimately decided to keep it going because what it represents is it represents a foothold at the end of the podcasting value chain, right? So Podium is occupying this new node in the podcasting value chain. And then at the very end of that value chain, we've got the Fathom player, right? So anytime you have a solid foothold in two nodes within a value chain, you can actually begin to basically like halo effect, right? So, for instance, some things that we haven't done on Podium, like, oh, you sign up for Podium, you get boosted within the Fathom algorithms, right? So, there's all kinds of sort of synergistic levers you can begin to pull. Now, when you pivot from a consumer product into, like, say, a B2B space, if you're not, if you're on a completely different value chain, well, then you might want to think about shutting that thing down. But what I really wish is that we had more engineering capacity to really do more with the Fathom player, because we've been so focused on getting Podium off the ground. But we kept the Fathom player going because we actually use a lot of that user feedback that we get from within the app to help refine our neural networks. So, and it's awesome because it creates even a better discovery experience for Fathom listeners, and then it creates better output for Podium podcasters too. So, when users are clipping and saying what they like within a podcast, well, that's instructive for our AI to figure out where the good clips are within audio that you upload to Podium, for instance. So, so we're definitely keeping Fathom as a player going, and then the goal is in the future, once kind of like the totality of the Podium vision has been realized, we'll begin devoting more engineering resources to really pushing that player product further.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And just one thing that I wanted to share, because when I was onboarding onto the Fathom player, first of all, I really loved the flow. But what struck me the most was at the end of it, when it says, share us on Twitter, and you're not just sharing you on Twitter. It actually gives you a list of different like logos and all kinds of like brand stuff that you can share and you can use, or and also use it in different colors and stuff, so that maybe it, I don't know, matches your whatever you've been posting already. So, and when I got to it, I thought, oh my God, that was absolutely a brilliant move. So, how did you get to it? And does it work for you? Do people actually share?
Are you referring to the Fathom product or to Podium?
Fathom. Yeah, yeah,
On
yeah.
Fathom, I'm unsure. Do we actually have that flow? I'm wondering which app you actually downloaded. I'm wondering if maybe you ended up. So, did you download the Fathom podcast player? I mean, we do have an onboarding flow. I'm not sure.
No, it was just so when you go to claim your podcast to access Fathom's audio intelligence, you can add your podcast and then goes to type form. And in the type form,
Oh,
when you get to the
I'm wondering.
end,
Are you looking
yeah,
on the website or within the application itself?
yes.
I'm not.
No, on the
Oh,
website.
okay, okay. Let me look really quick. You know what? I okay. No, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of different features, and there's also stuff that has been worked on that on the marketing side that I haven't touched on the marketing and design side. So I'm
Okay.
yeah.
That
I mean,
makes sense.
I think my co-founder and his team actually maybe built out that entire flow. So I couldn't speak to it directly, but generally speaking, with regards to like sharing, right, in referrals, this does kind of like strike at the heart of how we look at growth within our company. So we use a funnel that's called ARG, right? And it's basically awareness, activation, uh, uh, retention, revenue, and referrals. Right. So that's actually how we analyze our company, kind of top to bottom. We see it as a funnel that starts with awareness and that goes into activation. And for us, in our particular case, then we're looking at revenue, then we're looking at retention, and then we're looking at referrals. So um, we play this game actually. We have an interesting setup where like anybody on our team, it's like marketing is everybody's job, right? And growth is everybody's job because we don't have a dedicated marketing position right now. So for a while, what we were doing is we had 2 week competitions. We actually, at the end of our stand ups every day, review our entire funnel with the whole team every single day. And
Oh, wow.
right. So everybody on the team,
That's intense.
well, because it gets it drilled into your head. And we want everybody asking the question because from a like a management standpoint, we tend to give a lot of kind of like free reign over what it is you're doing. I mean, we guide things obviously, but when you drill growth into every team member's brain every single day, what you get is as they're working, they're asking themselves, is this contributing to one of those graphs? Because everything you're doing ultimately should be making some graph either continue to go up into the right, or if it's not going up into the right, it should be making it go up into the right. So, and we would actually do this competition where, and it would run on a 2 week cycle. And anybody on the team, doesn't matter what department you're in, picks one line on within the funnel, because there's within our funnel there's about, I don't know, like 30 different charts that we have. I mean, we fly through it. It's only like a 4 minute
Okay.
process. But everybody on the team would pick a line that is not moving up into the right. And in that 2 weeks, they would see, is there anything I can do to make this move up into the right? And then at the end of the 2 week period on Friday, we would all, kind of present our line. Did it move up into the right or did it not? And and then also what we did to attempt to make it go up into the right, what we learned about that particular metric, and then we would all vote to see, who we thought actually was the master growth marketer for the last 2 weeks. So,
That's
which is all to
exciting.
say that, yeah, you will see at the end of a lot of our flows a prompting to share and to actually refer, because that is the last step at the end of our growth funnel is referrals. So we're really big about referrals, because at the bottom, that referral step then feeds back into the top of the funnel, right, which is awareness. So if you can get all those things going up and to the right, you look at your awareness, it just keeps going up and up and up. When you look at your activation, post awareness, up and up and up and up. Revenue, up and up and up and up. Retention, at least steady. And then referrals, up and up and up and up. It's those referrals are going to feed back into the top of the funnel, and you're going to create a virtuous growth cycle, right? And so that engine begins to power itself, and you're not having to spend as much time actually marketing. And this is the this is another great point for anybody who's kind of like in an early stage startup listening to this. There's a real you see a lot of startups, and it's like, who do we have as a founder? um, you've got an engineer and a hustler, right? Or maybe you have an engineer and a designer, right? or even potentially like an engineer and a marketer, right? Which you're seeing a lot more now. Uh, the engineer and the marketer combination is actually one of the most powerful. Because what I've come to learn, when you have an engineer and a designer, which I think is the most common, and what I mean by designer, that's kind of all encompassing, right? That's like user experience design, graphic design, somebody who makes it look hot. Um, what ends up happening is the engineer is all about product and the designer is all about product. My product, it's like the most important thing in the world. But that's not the truth. Here is the reality. Distribution is king. And what you want to focus
Yeah.
on, uh, even before you build, don't even build your product. Just see if you can get it out there, something about it out there. See if you can create buzz. Do that first. And if you're successful in that, it's going to save you a tremendous amount of pain in the long run.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just on that note, in my previous job, I was a marketer at this low code platform. And for a long time, we were just so focused on user experience and like how to make programming cool for developers. Like some of them don't want to program hard anymore, so we're going to make sure low code is there. Someone still wants to program, so let them program. And at the end, we realized that whatever they build there, they actually have to sell it. And if you're an indie
Right.
hacker that comes to the platform to leverage it and to build something super fast, our best work would be to create a flow where this platform will also help them sell the product. And
Brilliant.
that's
Yeah.
when the entire vision just pivoted. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, so completely agree with you. So that said, what has been your biggest marketing channel, and what has been bringing you customers more than anything?
Right. Well, initially it was actually like Reddit was a huge, it kind of kicked everything off. I think Reddit sometimes something that's overlooked, because everybody's so focused on like, oh, I gotta have like TikTok videos, or I need to have, um,
I was afraid of Reddit for so
right.
long.
It can kind of seem like an abyss.
So many
Right.
rules.
Sometimes, well, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what stops people are the rules, right? So maybe you find like a Reddit, or a subreddit, and you're like, oh, this is like the perfect place for me to put my product out there. But then you look at the rules, and like it's like, you have to give the blood of your firstborn child to post anything in there commercially, you know.
Yes.
And that's going to scare you away, because oftentimes, in the startup world, we're looking for like fast, quick, go, ready, fire, aim. So, uh, my recommendation there is like, don't overlook it. Actually take the time, write the moderators. And if you have a product that you're building that is actually like super cool and great for that particular Reddit audience, and it's going to help them and offer value, it's especially good if there's something of value that you can offer beforehand, right? To people. We found that the moderators, they'll give us the thumbs up, like, yeah, sure, that this looks cool, go ahead and post. And then next thing you have 500 visitors. So Reddit has been an amazing channel, at least especially in the beginning. And where do you sell milk? You sell milk in the milk aisle, right? That's where you want your ad. If you're selling milk, you want an ad for your milk right where people are pulling milk out. So you really want to, it's going to vary kind of across the board. And for us, um, almost every podcaster has a Twitter, right? It's almost kind of like mandatory. Now, not all of them, but a lot. So we really have invested heavily into our Twitter presence and like our marketing on Twitter. For us in particular, it's been interesting because traffic on Twitter will get you a lot of mobile traffic, but that for us, that's not necessarily like the highest converting traffic. we really want people to visit like the Podium site for the first time on their desktop or wherever it is that they're doing their production work for their podcast. So that's been kind of interesting, trying to target people or podcasters like when they're on their desktop. Google's worked really well for that. A lot of it's now word of mouth. People really love the product, and so they tell all their podcasters have podcaster friends. Um, you know, be,
That's how I got it.
right? They're in the space. They interview other podcasters, right? So when they find something good, and it's such a cool community of people. But when they find something good, they definitely tend to share it. In particular, because they kind of like want to look like a thought leader in their field, right? So if they found something new and cool, it's like I found it first. It's like wearing the T-shirt of a band or something. So yeah, a little bit.
That's true.
So referrals has been really really good for us, and then of course, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Buzzsprout, which is like the number 2 RSS host by podcast episode publishing volume, and they have massive distribution, over 100,000 like active paying podcasters. Well, they went and they wanted to build a Podium like feature into their product, so they approached us, and we had an API, and we've since basically made it enterprise grade. I have a lot of experience in engineering APIs, so that really came in handy. And through them, they've been such an awesome partner. Not only is the co-host AI product very well loved on their side, but when we launched things like Podbook, right, which is our new product at Podium that basically takes your entire content library and adapts it into like a book like form, they actually sent a link out to it in their newsletter to 400,000 podcasters. Completely blew up our wait list.
Oh no, that's why I'm not even moving up the wait list.
Right. Hey, if you're on there, we're talking. So I will move you up. We're doing we're
Connections.
right. Yeah, it's all about who you know. Yeah, if you're on the wait list,
Yes.
yeah, I'll hook you up and I'll start taking a look at your content.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the
Wow.
interest in it's been super super fantastic. I mean, we kind of knew it would be popular, but I'd say it's like 5 or 6 times more popular than we had even imagined. It's a little bit slow going right now because we worked with some limited content while we were building the initial algorithms. And as we've taken on kind of like our first batch of podcasters in this beta, kind of like our first beta cohort, we're learning a lot about the kinds of challenges that end up being faced when you're trying to take hundreds of hours of audio, in some cases 400 hours of audio, and then writing a 60 to 90,000 word book out of that content with AI in its current
That's
state
crazy.
today. So we're learning a lot and refining those algorithms as we go through the process. So it might be 2 or 3 weeks before I get back to you, but when I do, it's going to be pretty push button, and we'll
Okay.
get your content going.
All right. I'll take your word for it. Thank you again. All right. I have just a couple more questions,
Sure.
and the first one is the one that everyone gets. What's so far been for you as a founder, or for Podium and Fathom, the biggest win and the biggest failure?
The biggest win and the biggest failure. Oh, that's tough. There's been a lot of wins and a lot of failures. Um,
Oh yes.
right. So, with for Podium, by far and away, the biggest win was our partnership with Buzzsprout. And they had taken a look at several other competitive options in our space, and we ultimately won out. And how did we win out? Here's what's really funny about Podium as a product. It's almost kind of ridiculous because there's very little UI behind it, as you've probably noticed, right? It's like you upload your audio. We
That's what I
we
love about
literally
it.
give you text files. Literally just give you text. And what's funny is the reason why we do that is because it was just a market test for a pivot, you know? And so we're like, you know what? Let's go so fast. Let's not even build a UI. Let's just give them a zip file with all of the AI output. And as it turned out, that's actually a feature. People love it because they're like, oh, I don't got to like screw around in your UI or anything. I can just slice and dice it. I know everybody knows how to use a text file. So it ended up being a feature. It's funny because we are adding in quite a bit more UI that we're working on now, but now we're always going to have the option to just download the whole package, you know? Um, so anyhow, because we didn't tackle the UI or like a really complicated UI first, we really freed us up to put more time into the quality. And so when Buzzsprout was evaluating options in the space, they stumbled on Podium. They're like, "Whoa, this is not the same," you know, compared to the other options out there. And ultimately, that ended up helping us win the business from them. And you know, they have. I mean, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but by rough calculations, maybe 25% market share. When as an RSS host, they are the number 2 RSS host behind Spotify. Um, so I mean, it doesn't get much better than that as far as you know actual distribution goes,
Yeah.
and it's been quite huge for us. So I would say by far and away, that's besides like landing significant funding, like as a company, that's been our biggest win within the marketplace. Our biggest,
It is a pretty big win.
yeah, our biggest failure. You know, this is a hard one. I think it's hard sometimes as entrepreneurs to really like face our mistakes. But one mistake I can definitely say that we made was um so we closed our seed round funding. So we kind of like raised a pre-seed in 2021. We were accepted into Jason Calacanis's launch, and you know, got some investment there, and then ultimately, you know, raised a seed round from multiple investors, but also including Jason Calacanis's syndicate, and that all closed in early, very early of 2022. You know, and thank God for that, because everything started to go sideways immediately thereafter, right? So we spent, yeah, we
Absolutely.
spent we had kind of launched a very simple V1 of the Fathom player um, early on, like actually right before like the seed round closed. We launched it on iOS, and it was cool. We wanted to get this new innovative like podcast search tech out into the marketplace and start learning. So we did a good job there in getting that out quickly. What we learned is that when it comes to a podcast player, that there's a lot of like kind of like parody features that you need to have that have kind of been built out over the last, you know, 15 years or so of having like podcast be a thing. So we realized that like while Fathom was cool, it was following like retention wise into this novelty category. And that's not what you want, right? You really need, if you're going to be successful in the consumer space, you need retention numbers up above 35% minimum. You want somebody, you know, 3 months from now, you still have like 30% of your users coming back week after week after week after week. And that's hard. That's why the consumer space is quite difficult. Um, and we just weren't seeing those numbers. We were able to get people to download it and try it, no problem, but we weren't seeing those retention numbers. And in doing user interviews, we realized that yeah, we needed to add all of these parody features, the ability to download episodes, right? And a sleep timer, right? Just a lot, but there were a lot of them, and they're little tiny features, and they take engineering time to do, which is really difficult when you're trying to build a podcast player from the future. You know, you're investing heavily into the AI side of things, doing a lot of AI tricks, but then you also need to actually have a door handle on the door. You're like, who knew? So we went back to the drawing board, and we started designing, started engineering for V2 of the player that included everything. And that ended up turning into an 8-month long engineering cycle. Uh, yeah, just a lot of contractors, a lot of our time internally. And what we actually ended up doing, we shut off all the marketing for Fathom because it would just burn. Like we were adding
Oh,
users,
wow.
but it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. They weren't retaining. So we made the tough decision. We said we're shutting off all the marketing. We're going back to the drawing board. We're going to do V2 and we're going to completely knock it out of the park. But rather than shipping iteratively, we took 8 months to do it, and that burned a lot of cash. We launched, and there's people who download the Fathom player and stop using Spotify. That's no easy feat. But I think that if we had to do it all over again, maybe we would have taken a far more iterative approach, right, to the launching of features rather than this just massive engineering cycle that I think ultimately kind of put us in a bit of a squeeze when it came time to pivot, because like when you're building in the dark, you're not gaining users, you're not gaining mind share and all of that kind of stuff. It's great to do the whole stealth mode thing, but if you're going to do the whole like long term, nearly a year stealth mode thing, you don't need 2 million in funding, you need 10 million in funding.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, at least, lesson learned.
Lesson learned, no
So,
problem.
um, you know, there, I remember there is a saying, uh, it's not, it's not a mistake, or it's not oh my God, it's not a failure, it's an expense. So, yeah, I think in your case, maybe it was the same. It
Well,
just turned out
it
to
was
be
just
really expensive experiment.
yeah, it was just ultimately the cost of learning, and I mean, I could definitely, and it wasn't a failure. It ultimately like ended up in us shipping a great product, but I don't think company wise and business wise, it maybe was the best thing to do. And again, this speaks to the fact that if you're coming at this, if you're a solo founder or you have a co-founder, and one of you is a designer or an UX person and the other one's an engineer, your blind spot is going to be marketing and distribution and understanding that needs to come first, not like an afterthought, right? It doesn't matter what you build. Nobody cares about what you build until you make them care, right? So start there, make
Yeah.
people care about what you're building. And in fact, I think that's why some of the indie hacker stuff is actually like super cool because um, that whole build in public idea, what you're actually doing is you're gaining mind share as you're developing the product. Maybe if I had to do it all over again, if we just had to do this 8-month long engineering and design cycle, maybe we should have just done it all in public, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a valid thought, and I completely agree. When I see sometimes indie hackers like on Twitter just sharing absolutely everything, we became ramen profitable. We're no longer ramen profitable. We failed. We gained two new customers and super happy. Uh, and it's like watching episodes. It's like it's a new Netflix, right? So you start like taking care of these guys and like try to go and visit their product hunt page and all that. So completely understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, building in public is a really great
We
thing.
actually have
All
competitors in
right.
the space who are doing it, but we're like friends with them. And like we actually get excited to like see them succeed just because,
Or so you
yeah, or so
say.
I say, or maybe I'm just being tricky. No, we actually
Yes.
have competitors who I think in any space I love competition. I think it's great. And I love good competition.
You have it every 2 weeks.
Right, exactly. And in part of the reason why we try to have good relationships with our competitors, it's like you're playing a friendly game, and you're gonna push each other to do better and better and better, and we're just very confident in our skills.
Okay. Yeah, and you have a reason to. So, my last question is about a hack. If you can share a hack that works for you, and it can be related to anything engineering, I don't know, being sane in the whole building a startup game, or customer acquisition, retention, marketing, whatever, something that works for you, works every time, and maybe is not by the book, but you love it.
Right. Okay. I'll give you three quick ones, kind of across different spaces. And
Yes, please.
the last one's disgusting. As far as like, it's almost a little,
Okay,
it's
we'll get
almost a
there.
little bit gray hat. Okay. Hack number one: every person on your team as a startup, if you're less than 15 employees, everybody's responsible for growth. Every single person. Uh, at the end of every stand up, every single day, review the growth funnel. Everybody is responsible for growth. They should be telling their friends. They should be do whatever you can do. Literally print stickers and put them on gas pumps. Okay, like everybody's responsible for growth.
How many friends
Just
did you tell about Podium today?
no, seriously. So like and pick a chart and make it move. Hopefully up and to the right. But even if you pick a chart and you make it crash, you just learn something. And in growth and marketing, it's all about learning. It's the most important part of doing a startup. So that's kind of like hack number one. Everybody's responsible for growth. Hack number two: everybody's on customer support. The entire team, right? And everybody takes shifts. And in fact, if you have a new hire, the only thing they should be doing for the first 2 weeks is customer support, right? And I mean, this isn't like a hack, and this is a common strategy, but it can sometimes be overlooked. If you have an intercom button, uh, everybody should be on intercom, and because that's the only way that you're going to be connected to the people who are using the things that you're building every day. So that's kind of like hack number two, right? Everybody is on customer support. Hack number three, and just to kind of like on the hack number two, there obviously you need to schedule time for deep work, okay, especially if you're in engineering or design, but everybody should be spending a little bit of time on support. Hack number three, and this is a really interesting one, and it won't apply to everybody.
Is it the disgusting one?
It's kind of the gray hat one. I shouldn't even be talking about it here, to be perfectly honest. But
Okay,
if and
please
this is
do.
more of an engineering hack, okay? Um, if you have data in your product, data that could potentially be useful, okay, to like data scientists, right? So data scientists use this language called R a lot, especially in academia. The interesting thing about R as a language, as opposed to Python or JavaScript, is that the R package system is actually distributed across numerous universities across the entire world. Okay, so when you upload a package into the R ecosystem as a language, it's actually getting distributed to the domains of all of the major universities across the entire world. This package management system is very old. So the links in the descriptions of your packages don't have no refs. All right. So if you are able to create an R package for your software in a legitimate way, right? Like it's legitimately useful to data scientists, you let's just say you may be able to dramatically increase your SEO by shipping that package and including links to like your sign up page. Okay. So, like I said,
That's scrappy.
super scrappy.
Yeah.
Watch, I
Okay.
just ruined it. I just ruined it for everybody. They'll find out about it. Anyhow, something to think about from an engineering perspective. But yeah, it is super scrappy. And again, don't like put out junk R packages out there. I'm talking about if like, for instance, on our side, right, we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of podcast transcripts. I haven't actually even done this particular hack for our startup, although I've been thinking about it. So, because we have
Or
all of this
so you
yeah,
say.
we have all of this podcast data, and I think that there's a real opportunity to actually create some really cool open source packages for people to utilize that data.
Okay, tomorrow on SaaS Group website, looking for our engineer, or what is it? Our programmer. We shouldn't.
I know.
Or
Suddenly see
but
our
yeah.
engineers, like the language shoots up, right? All because of marketing, which again goes to show you distribution is
Yes.
king.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay, those were really super cool. And I enjoyed the conversation immensely, honestly. Like I said at the beginning, first of all, I love the product. And now, talking to you got me even more excited about Fathom as well. And honestly, by talking to founders, I completely understand the trend of buying from people, not from companies, right? Because founders just um, get this fire going about their products, and you certainly have one that's really big. So thank you for talking about Podium and Fathom the way you just did. And please continue doing your magic.
I will. Thanks for having me on, Anna.
Thank you, and take care.